Welcome, Centralites. We're grateful for this opportunity to spend some time with you today and talk a little bit about the transition that is going to occur on May 1st when Pastor Linda retires. And in November, you had mentioned, you had said to the congregation that you were going to be retiring in 2024. Because of that, because of the unknowns when it comes to retirement, many people, including staff, have felt anxieties about what's to come. So part of the way in which we have been handling some of those anxious moments is during staff is you have a moment called transition tidings.
Right.
And you kind of share with us some of the things to keep our thoughts on and keep us focused as we are moving forward in that particular time. So I would love to have an opportunity to kind of share with the community, our congregation, about what some of those topics are.
Sure.
To help relieve some of the anxiety around change.
Yeah, sure. And just the inexperience on some people's part. Some people in the congregation come out of different kinds of church systems where pastors are appointed. And just other people just haven't been through a pastoral transition like this one. So we just want to take a few moments in this video, and there's a few others that are coming along to talk about those things. So that I think the first thing is just to acknowledge that it is a big change, right? I've served as the senior pastor here for 21 and a half years. It'll be 22 by the time I retire. And so anytime a long-time staff person leaves, moves on, that is going to be huge. And so, we want to just name that and say that it does bring up a lot of feelings. Brings up a lot of feelings in me, in the staff, in anybody who's really involved in the church. And so that's just the way it happens. It's all good. I just think it's helpful when we can name what we're feeling and share that. And so one of the things we'll do in these coming months is have some opportunities for conversation about that. And I think part of why it's so hard is that it's loss. Any change is loss, even if it's a good change. And so that's not a pleasant thing to go through. And then I think we just also want to remember that even while there's a lot of change, there are things that are staying constant. I mean, Central as a congregation, as a organization, as this community of people remains the call that we feel to respond to God and to be in service in our community and in the world. That's a constant. That doesn't change. And so, you're staying. Well, I'm not saying for 22 years, but you're a constant through this transition time as our leaders and the community in general. So I think that's one, just kind of the big overall thing that we talk about is like how to go through this change and be present to it and not be completely, overwhelmed by it.
Yeah, and as you talk about the change and the constant, as you said, I do stay, right? I don't retire with you. That'd be great. But
you're not old enough.
I'm not there yet.
Got a few more years.
So there's, I think one of the other aspects about that is you're retiring in May, and then I go on sabbatical in July. And so trying to help everybody adjust to the multiple changes that are happening, right? But I think what will be helpful for our community to know is there'll be interim during that particular time. And I will be with that person for 2 months before I go on sabbatical. And my role as associate pastor during this whole process doesn't change. My responsibilities are still the same. I still have responsibilities with the children, youth ministry team, hospitality, anti-racism team, technology. All those areas still remain a part of my work duty. So it doesn't change because you're not there. I think a perfect example of that would have been when you went on sabbatical not too long ago, and Grace was our interim. My role didn't change at that time. So in this same way, my role during the church in this process doesn't particularly change. That is a constant. I think it's also helpful for the church to know that I'm not applying for the job as senior pastor. That would be way too much change for me. The responsibilities that would have to shape. And so I think that's a thing the church needs to know during this particular process. And so I can continue to be what I have been to you, to the next person. Our interim is to be support. And at times, kind of like how we've worked in the past 5 years that I've been here, where your areas are, where you spend most of your time in. If you need me to help out, then you ask, and I help out in those particular areas. So those are the things that are remain constant. My role remained constant with the church. I think one of the other things that we talked about during those transition tidings is also helping the church understand that this is an opportunity also to live out this program-centered way of being church that we have talked about, as a community. Prior to me coming here, the church, I would say, had a little shift, right, from being a pastor-centered church to a program-centered church. And for those who don't necessarily know what that means, a pastor-centered church really has to do with the size of the congregation. So that could be anywhere from 75 to 150, and kind of the decision makings, all the ins and outs kind of flow through a pastor. And then in a program-centered model, which is a little bit larger congregation context in that, doesn't necessarily work in that way. Program-centered model has its leaders, ideas, all those things function through that. And then staff, your pastors are support to those ministries throughout the church. And so we have been trying to live that out. The pandemic kind of pushed us back. And so we have, we have functioned in a quasi state. There was some pastor-centered ways, some program-centered ways. And I think a transition like that can help all of us start to move in working in a program-centered model. So that's, I think, one of the areas we've talked about in our transition tidings.
Yeah. And I'll just say, I think, that's a difficult transition to make. I mean, I'll speak for myself, right? I came in when the church was much smaller, and you do operate in a different way. And I often say I'm really a small church pastor at heart. And so moving into a program-centered church, I believe in it. It has to happen, but it's also not my natural way. So that's one way in which I think having a new leader, can benefit the church in that process. So
I think one of the other things that I guess people have questions about, and one of the things we would say, if there's any particular questions you have for us as staff, or even for Linda, please ask, and don't hesitate to ask. But I think one of the things that have popped up in conversation is, what happens when you're done? Like March, May 2nd.
May 2nd, right? Yes. So I think that the experience of many congregations over many years has led to some wisdom about what's the best and healthiest way for a congregation and a pastor to transition after a pastor served in that congregation. And I think the general wisdom is that the pastor who's retiring or leaving really needs to step away. Because it's very difficult if you're a church member and I'm your pastor, like one day we have that relationship and the next day we see each other and it's a different relationship. That's a hard thing to make.
Yeah.
The main thing is that there needs to be some space, there needs to be some detachment from me as the senior pastor, so that there is room for a new person to come in, right? And the new person will be different, right? So a very quick transition can be hard, especially if the outgoing pastor is present. And so we want Central to be as healthy a congregation as it can. So what that means is that, I'm stepping away, I'm not coming to church here. And that's not to say that I never could, but there needs to be a really, good period of time until a new pastor is settled and comfortable and connected to the congregation. And so, for me, honestly, that's one of the hardest things about leaving is, I have I have relationships with this congregation that are, meaningful and important. And so it feels harsh at times, but I think it's just the best thing for everyone to sort of move into a new way of being.
Yeah.
So
it's like, it's almost like ripping a Band-Aid off really fast, Sometimes you have to do it, but in this moment it's necessary.
Yeah. So one of the other things that we've also talked about in our transition tidings in the staff meeting is just the fact that I have a lot of institutional knowledge in my head. And so we're thinking about just how to pass along some of that. We really would love to have like the little chip, that goes into
like
the brain and can just do a brain dump. But in the absence of that, we're, just brainstorming about how to pass on and some of that knowledge. So I think one thing that all of us can do is if there's something that you don't know that relates to your area of ministry or even doesn't, rather than, find out, rather than, let somebody else do it, like find out how it works. Obviously, I have a role in, whether it's written down or recorded or talking with people, of passing things on. But also there are sort of a lot of default, hey, let's ask Linda, right? And so, in those cases, just kind of catch ourselves and go, well, let's find out and pass this on to somebody else.
Well, I think it could be helpful for us as a whole, to have more conversations like this in the future. And so we invite you, when you listen to this, to think about any questions that you may have, and we'll do our best to respond and answer. I know that in the same way that you are dealing with the change and grief and loss that's happening right now, we as staff are also dealing with that. So this is something that we're all experiencing together, and we're not alone in this process. So thanks.
Thank you.